Captain Thale Harrow was having a bad day, which was saying something given his usual standards involved either being shot at, blown up, or discovering that his most recent acquisition had a habit of leaking radioactive goo. Today was special. Today, the universe had decided to blame him for a galactic plague. "So, anyone else feeling like we just ran over the universe's cat?" Thale muttered, staring at the flickering holo screen in the dimly lit cockpit of the Rust Bucket, named for reasons that should be obvious to anyone with eyes. Beside him, his second-in-command, Vex, snorted. Maybe it was a really big cat. With a grudge, the rest of the crew, a ragtag bunch of misfits who somehow found camaraderie and shared bad luck, sat around the cramped cockpit, trying to make sense of the news feeds. Each headline seemed more fantastically ludicrous than the last. Space pirates responsible for galactic plague. Human tech spreads deadly virus. And Thale's personal favorite, humans, the universe's worst roommates. "I mean, I know we're not exactly model citizens," Vex continued, leaning back in his seat and propping his boots up on the control panel, "but unleashing a plague, even I'm not that ambitious." Thale rubbed his temples. "This isn't about ambition. It's about whoever's out there needing a scapegoat, and we apparently fit the bill." "Hey, at least they got the piracy part right," said Rogan, the gruff engineer who looked like he was built from leftover parts of a battleship. "I was worried our reputation was slipping." "Great," Thale said dryly. "Next they'll accuse us of kicking puppies and stealing candy from alien babies." The truth was, they were pirates of convenience more than anything else. Once upon a time, Thale had dreams of grandeur and glory. Now, he just wanted to avoid getting blown to bits by overzealous planetary defense forces. And maybe, just maybe, find out who was really behind this plague nonsense. "So what's the plan, Captain?" asked Kira, the ship's navigator, and master of being simultaneously optimistic and pessimistic. "We can't exactly stay here and wait for the next headline to accuse us of starting the universe's worst fashion trends." Thale chuckled despite himself. "I've got a plan, all right. Not a good one, mind you, but it's a plan." Their best bet was Navurax, a temple city that was equal parts chaos and sanctuary, depending on which side of the law you found yourself on. A place where information flowed like cheap liquor, and both were as reliable as a politician's promise. "Navurax?" Vex raised an eyebrow. "You sure you want to hide in a place where most folks would sell their own grandmother for a half credit?" "Hey, it's not like they can blame us for that," Thale said with a wry grin. "Besides, in a place like Navurax, we're just another set of greasy fingerprints on the city's dirty walls." "Right," Vex nodded, then turned to the rest of the crew. "Pack up your stuff. We're going to pay a visit to the universe's favorite den of thieves and scoundrels." As the Rust Bucket trundled its way through the black nothingness of space, Thale allowed himself a moment of reflection, which mostly involved wondering what series of poor life choices had brought him to this point. But hey, at least he wasn't boring. Navurax was exactly what Thale expected it to be: noisy, claustrophobic, and smelled like a combination of burnt circuitry and bad decisions. The city was a sprawling mess of haphazardly constructed buildings, each fighting for space like drunks in a brawl. It was a place where religion, commerce, and crime intersected in an unholy alliance that somehow kept the city from collapsing into itself. "Welcome to Navurax," Thale said as the crew disembarked, the city's cacophony assaulting their senses. "Where the motto is trust no one and the city mascot is likely to shiv you in a dark alley." "Charming," Kira remarked, pulling her hood up against the glaring neon lights. "I can see why you brought us here. Told you it wasn't a good plan," Thale replied. "Just the best we've got." Their first stop was a local dive, the Black Hole, a place where the drinks were as questionable as the clientele. The bartender, a grizzled old alien with more arms than was strictly necessary, gave them a nod as they entered. "Harrow," the bartender growled in what passed for greeting. "Still alive, I see." "Barely," Thale replied, sliding onto a bar stool. "Got any drink that won't immediately kill me?" "What be the fun in that?" the bartender replied, pouring something green and vaguely luminescent into a glass. Cheers, Thale said, holding up the glass before taking a cautious sip. It tasted like regret and poor financial decisions. Vex leaned against the bar, scanning the room with a practiced eye. Looks like business as usual. Think anyone here knows anything about the plague? Probably, Thale said. But getting them to talk might involve more than just buying them a drink. A shadow fell across the table as an unwelcome presence loomed over them. Harrow, the newcomer said, voice dripping with disdain. Still making trouble, I see. Thale looked up to see a familiar face belonging to a man who seemed to thrive on conflict. Galen, Thale said, his smile more of a grimace. I was hoping you choked on your own ego by now. Galen laughed, a sound like nails on a chalkboard. As it happens, I've got a job for you. Thale raised an eyebrow. Sorry, we're out of the plague business. Funny, Galen replied, though his eyes were anything but. But this one's worth your while. Information on who's spreading those rumors about you lot. Thale exchanged a glance with Vex. As far as deals with the devil went, this one was surprisingly tempting. What's the catch? Galen leaned closer, his breath a mix of cheap booze and bad intentions. I need you to steal something from the Temple of Reclamation. Thale laughed, a short, sharp bark. You do realize that's like asking us to stroll into a battlefield and politely ask everyone to stop shooting, right? Oh, I know, Galen said, the smile never reaching his eyes. But you're good at walking away from disasters. Just thought I'd give you something new to run from. Thale considered the offer. On one hand, it was a suicide mission. On the other, it was a chance to clear their names. All right, he said finally. We'll take it, but if you screw us over, I'll make sure your life is a never-ending loop of misery. Galen chuckled as he turned to leave. Looking forward to working with you, Harrow. As Galen vanished into the crowd, Vex turned to Thale. You're sure about this? Nope, Thale replied, downing the rest of his drink in one go. But it's the best shot we've got. With that, the crew of the Rust Bucket found themselves embroiled in a scheme that promised danger, double crosses, and the slim possibility of salvation. Just another day in the universe's worst neighborhood. As they left the bar, Kira turned to Thale, her expression a mix of curiosity and concern. Think we'll make it out of this one, Captain? Thale grinned, though the expression didn't quite reach his eyes. I don't know, Kira, but whatever happens, it'll be one hell of a ride. The crew of the Rust Bucket shuffled through the chaotic streets of Navurax, trying to blend in with the assortment of riffraff that populated the city. It was like a parade of poor life choices, each with its own unique aroma. Thale kept his head down, hoping that no one would recognize them from the news feeds that had plastered their faces across the galaxy like unwanted wanted posters. So, Captain, Vex said, dodging a particularly aggressive street vendor who seemed to be selling something that might have once been food, how do you plan on getting that intel from the Temple of Reclamation? Ask nicely. Oh, sure, Thale snorted. I'll just walk up, tip my hat, and say, pardon me, could I have your top secret information, please? I'm sure that'll work wonders. Works wonders for getting us stabbed, maybe, Rogan chimed in, his perpetual scowl deepening as a hoverbike zipped past, narrowly missing him. This place is a death trap. Yeah, well, it's either this or trying to reason with an angry mob that thinks we're Space Plague's patient zero, Thale replied. I'll take my chances with the death trap, Kira, ever the optimist, chimed in. Maybe we'll get lucky and find someone who hates the temple more than they hate us. Thale gave her a sideways glance. If such a miracle happened, I'd probably keel over from the shock. As they navigated the tangled alleys, Vex's eyes darted to a series of holo posters plastered across a wall. The flickering images advertised a new bounty, 100,000 credits for any human. The accompanying text wasn't exactly subtle about suggesting humans were the root of all the galaxy's woes. Bit of an overreaction, don't you think? Vex said, jabbing a thumb at the poster. You'd think they were offering free drinks or something. Great, Thale muttered. We're not just accused of starting a plague, we're officially an endangered species with a price tag, endangered. Rogan grunted. More like open season. Thale sighed, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. We need to find that intel and clear our names, or we'll be hunted down like whatever the hell this is. He gestured at the holo poster with a grimace. As they continued, the alleys seemed to close in around them, the cacophony of Navurax growing louder, pressing against their senses like an unwelcome reminder of their precarious situation. Thale caught sight of a few rough-looking types watching them with a little too much interest. "Looks like we've caught someone's eye," Kira noted, her voice low. "Perfect," Thale said, rolling his eyes, "because we definitely needed more complications today." The alley opened up into a wider street where a bustling market buzzed with activity. Stalls of dubious legality lined the street, where merchants haggled over everything from questionable tech to even more questionable body mods. It was the sort of place where you could buy anything, except, apparently, a sense of personal space. "Let's just try to blend in," Thale said, though he knew it was easier said than done. Even in a place like Navurax, where everyone had a secret, the crew's presence stood out like a sore thumb. They were halfway through the market when a commotion erupted behind them. Thale turned just in time to see a group of aliens pushing through the crowd, their eyes locked on the crew with predatory intent. "Well, we've definitely made some friends," Vex said, sarcasm dripping from every word. "Sorry, we're all out of autographs," Thale shouted, turning to run. The crew bolted through the market, dodging between stalls as their pursuers closed in. "We're not gonna outrun them," Rogan growled, glancing back. "They're faster than we are." "Then we improvise," Thale replied, skidding to a halt and ducking into a narrow side alley. Vex and the others followed, their footsteps echoing off the grimy walls. The alley dead-ended at a high fence, the rusted metal twisted and jagged. Thale cursed under his breath, glancing around for an escape route. "Great leadership, Captain," Vex quipped, panting. "Lead us right into a trap. I'm open to suggestions." Thale shot back, scanning the alley for anything they could use. Their pursuers appeared at the mouth of the alley, alien faces twisting into expressions that were unmistakably hostile. They advanced, weapons drawn and aimed squarely at the crew. "Looks like we're having a standoff," Kira said, her voice remarkably calm given the circumstances. "More like a last stand," Rogan grumbled, cracking his knuckles. "Wait," Thale said, holding up a hand. "Let's not be hasty. We're all civilized beings here, right? Speak for yourself," one of the aliens snarled, stepping forward. "Humans are a plague, and we've got orders to eradicate every last one of you." Thale raised his hands, trying to look as non-threatening as possible. "Look, I get it. You're just following orders, right? But how about we skip the whole shooting us dead part? Why should we?" Another alien demanded, squinting down the barrel of a rather intimidating blaster. "Because we didn't start this plague," Thale said, using his best trust-me voice. "Honestly, we're just trying to clear our names." The aliens hesitated, exchanging glances. Apparently, the trust-me voice needed some work. "Look," Vex interjected, stepping up beside Thale. "You're clearly smart folks. Would a bunch of pirates really have the resources to engineer a plague?" "I mean, we can barely keep our ship from falling apart." "Yeah," Kira added, "and if you kill us, how are you going to explain that to your bosses?" "Oh, we shot some space hobos, but they definitely weren't the ones we were looking for." "Our bad." The leader of the alien group wavered, clearly caught in the conflict between duty and doubt. Thale took a step closer, palms still raised. "How about this? Let us go, and if we don't clear our names, you'll know where to find us. I promise we're not that great at hiding." The silence stretched, tension crackling in the air like static. Finally, the alien leader lowered his weapon, though he didn't look happy about it. "Fine," he said grudgingly. "But if I see you again, there won't be any talking." "Deal," Thale said, relief flooding through him. The alien group retreated, leaving the alley as quietly as they'd arrived. Thale exhaled slowly, feeling like he'd just cheated death. Again. "Nicely done, Captain," Vex said, clapping Thale on the shoulder. "Didn't even have to break a sweat." Yeah, well, I prefer my blood inside my body, Thale replied, trying to sound more confident than he felt. Rogan snorted. Guess we're still on the hook for that intel, though. Yeah, Thale agreed, moving to the fence and examining it for weaknesses. But at least we've got a little breathing room. For now. Kira climbed up on a stack of crates, peeking over the top of the fence. Looks clear on the other side. Think we can make it? Thale nodded, gesturing for the others to follow. Let's get out of here before they change their minds. The crew scrambled over the fence, landing awkwardly on the other side. Thale dusted himself off, wondering just how long their luck would hold. As they slipped back into the relative anonymity of Navurax's winding streets, Thale's mind turned to the next steps. They had an impossible task ahead of them, but then again, he'd never been one to back down from impossible odds. It was either that or face a galaxy that wanted them dead. So what's the plan now? Vex asked, falling into step beside Thale as they navigated the labyrinth of dilapidated structures. We still need intel, Thale said, squinting against the neon glare. And I think I know just the place to start. Vex raised an eyebrow. Oh yeah? Where's that? Thale smiled, though it was more grimace than grin. There's an info broker named Skarn who owes me one. Time to call in that favor, Rogan chuckled, a sound that was more rust than mirth. Guess we're about to see just how much a favor's worth in this dump. As they wound their way through the labyrinthine streets, Thale couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. It was a creepy, crawly sensation, like a spider tiptoeing on the back of his neck. He glanced around, but the crowd was a sea of indifference, each person wrapped up in their own little world of scams and schemes. They reached Skarn's place, a nondescript door wedged between two equally unremarkable buildings. The paint was peeling, the sign was missing letters, and the whole thing screamed welcome to your doom in a way that was almost nostalgic. Thale knocked, the sound echoing dully in the cramped hallway. "Who is it?" came a voice from inside, raspy and suspicious. "It's Harrow," Thale replied, leaning against the wall with a practiced nonchalance. "I'm here to collect on that favor you owe me." There was a pause, then the door creaked open, revealing Skarn, a wiry little creature with eyes like twin black holes, hungry for information and devoid of light. He was part human, part something else, and all trouble. "Harrow," Skarn said, the word drawn out like he was tasting it. "Didn't think I'd be seeing you again so soon. Or ever, really." "Yeah, well, life's full of surprises," Thale said with a wolfish grin. "We need information, and we need it fast. Word is you're the guy who knows things. Depends on what kind of things you're looking for," Skarn replied, his eyes darting to Vex, Rogan, and Kira. "And what you're willing to pay. Like I said, you owe me," Thale reminded him, pushing past into the dim interior where clutter and chaos reigned supreme. "We're looking for intel on the Temple of Reclamation, and maybe whoever's behind this plague nonsense." Skarn's thin lips curled into a semblance of a smile. "Ah, you're in deeper than I thought. Plague, temples, and pirates sounds like the start of a bad joke. Yeah, well, the punchline's terrible," Vex quipped, leaning on a stack of precariously balanced crates. Skarn rummaged through a pile of holochips, his fingers moving with practiced speed. "Temple of Reclamation's tricky business. They don't take kindly to snoopers." "We're not snooping," Thale said, crossing his arms. "We're liberating information. Liberating." Skarn chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. "Call it what you want. But the temple's heavily guarded and the folks inside don't exactly like visitors." "Great," Rogan muttered. "Just what we needed. A welcoming committee." Skarn handed Thale a chip, his eyes glinting with something that might have been mischief or malice. "This'll get you in, sort of. A backdoor code, courtesy of an old friend who doesn't know when to stop talking." "Appreciated," Thale said, pocketing the chip. "Anything else we should know?" "Just this," Skarn said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "The temple's got eyes everywhere, and they're not just looking for anyone. They're looking for you." "Of course they are," Thale said with a resigned sigh. Because why would anything be easy? With the intel in hand, the crew left Skarn's place, thoughts heavy as they made their way through the crowded streets. Thal's mind raced with possibilities, none of them particularly pleasant. Think this'll actually help us? Kira asked, her voice low. Thale shrugged, a half-hearted gesture. It's better than nothing. And nothing's what we've got if we don't try. The crew walked on, the weight of their task pressing down like a physical thing. They were up against impossible odds, but then again, impossibility was kind of their specialty. As they ventured deeper into the belly of Navurax, Thale hoped that luck, or whatever scant scraps they could muster, would be on their side. The rust bucket was more of a junkyard in space than a ship, and standing in its dim, cluttered belly, Captain Thale Harrow felt like he was piloting a floating graveyard. But today, it had one redeeming quality. It was still moving, which was more than he could say for most of his plans. Thale paced the cockpit, occasionally stopping to peer at the flickering holo screen. News kept flashing by, each headline sounding like a death knell. Humans to blame for plague, read one. 100,000 credits for a human, screamed another. He sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. You know, he muttered, being public enemy number one really doesn't pay as well as you'd think. Vex glanced up from the pilot's seat, feet propped casually on the controls. Maybe we should ask for royalties. We're all over the news after all. Fugitives are the new celebrities. Yeah, and we'll get paid in plasma bolts, Rogan grunted from the corner, arms crossed and scowl firmly in place. I'm allergic to getting shot. Kira, ever the optimist, peered through the grime-smeared viewport. Look on the bright side. At least we know we're famous. Famous for being a virus, Thale quipped. Next stop, the Hall of Infamy. But first, we've got a date with an old friend. Ah, Xyler Vex, Vex said, a crooked grin on his face. I love how we're trusting a guy whose name literally means betrayal in some languages. Can't afford to be picky, Thale replied, tapping his fingers on the console. Besides, Xyler owes me a favor, or a punch in the face, haven't decided. Rogan snorted. I say we go for the punch. More satisfying. You're all heart, Rogan, Thale said dryly as he set the course for the last known location of Xyler Vex. But I'd rather not add more enemies to our collection. We've got enough to fill a galactic zoo. The rust bucket shuddered as it broke through the atmosphere of Navurax, a city that looked like it was designed by someone who hated straight lines and sanitation. Neon lights blinked erratically, casting garish reflections on the domed structures that made up the city's skeleton. They landed in a docking bay that had seen better days, probably before the invention of rust. As the crew disembarked, Thale motioned for them to keep a low profile. As low as 3 humans and whatever Vex was could manage in a city with a bounty on their heads. Xyler Vex's office turned out to be an old warehouse, the kind of place that looked like it had been condemned for health and safety reasons decades ago. Thale knocked on the door, which swung open with a groan that sounded disturbingly like an old man waking up. Inside, Xyler Vex was waiting, a man whose appearance screamed swindler. His smile was all teeth and no warmth. Thale Harrow, he said, stretching his arms wide like he was welcoming an old friend instead of a liability. Alive and well, just as I left you. Xyler, Thale replied, stepping inside with the others in tow. Still as charming as a pit of vipers, I see, Xyler chuckled, an unpleasant sound that echoed off the metal walls. And you're still as subtle as a meteor strike. What brings you to my humble abode? We need information, Thale said, getting straight to the point. About the plague, who's really behind it? Xyler scratched his chin, eyes glinting like a man who knew more than he let on. Oh, the plague, nasty business that. But why would you think I know anything more than the average citizen? Because you're not the average citizen, Vex interjected. You're the kind of guy who knows where the bodies are buried, probably because you put them there. Xyler shrugged, the picture of innocence. I dabble, but this plague business is above my pay grade, I'm afraid. Bull, Rogan said, his voice a low growl. Start talking. The smile fell from Xyler's face, replaced by a calculating look. Word is there's a conspiracy. Some big players setting humans up as the fall guys. Makes it easier to control the narrative if you've got a common enemy. Thale exchanged a glance with Vex. Names, Xyler. We need names. Ah, Xyler said, wagging a finger. That's where it gets tricky. There's more than one faction playing this game. Corporations, politicians, and a few religious nutjobs who think humans are some kind of cosmic disease. And they all stand to gain something from our downfall. Kira looked around nervously, biting her lip. Is anyone else feeling like we're in way over our heads? Every minute of every day, Thale muttered. But we can't turn back now. Not when we're this close to figuring out who's got it out for us. Before Xyler could say anything else, the door crashed open, and a squad of heavily armed militia stormed in, weapons drawn. They were wearing the insignia of the Navurax enforcement, which was about as reassuring as a snake in your boot. Well, Xyler said, raising his hands. Looks like the local welcome party has arrived. Xyler Vex, barked the squad leader, a burly alien with too many eyes and not enough patience. You're under arrest for conspiracy and aiding fugitives. And here I thought today would be boring, Vex remarked, glancing at Thale. Got a plan? Run, Thale suggested, already backing towards the nearest window. Sounds like a solid strategy, Rogan agreed, fists clenched. Thale turned to Xyler, who looked surprisingly composed for a man about to be carted off. Appreciate the intel, Xyler. Good luck with the arrest. Xyler merely nodded as if this was just another Tuesday. Don't be a stranger, Thale. Next time, bring better luck with you. The crew made a break for it as chaos erupted. Xyler's place wasn't exactly fortified, so it wasn't hard to find a way out through a conveniently loose panel that Kira yanked open with surprising ferocity. They tumbled into an alley, the sounds of the militia raid still echoing behind them. This feels familiar, Vex said as they sprinted away. Haven't we had enough of narrow escapes for one lifetime? We're pirates, Thale replied between breaths. Narrow escapes are in the job description. As they ducked and weaved through Navurax's shadowy labyrinth, Thale's mind spun with Xyler's words. A conspiracy of factions, all with their reasons to paint humans as the villains of the galaxy. It sounded insane, but then so was their current predicament. Where to now? Kira asked, glancing over her shoulder to make sure they weren't being followed. We need somewhere to regroup, Thale said, skidding to a halt at a junction. And thinking's overrated, Rogan deadpanned. But hiding, now that's an idea I can get behind. They found a rundown cantina, the kind of place where nobody asked questions because they were too busy drowning their own sorrows. It was dark, smoky, and smelled like desperation. Perfect camouflage for fugitives. As they settled into a shadowy booth, Thale's thoughts churned. The galaxy was a mess of deceit and paranoia, but they had to wade through it if they wanted any hope of clearing their names, or finding out who was really pulling the strings. All right, let's piece this together, Thale said, leaning forward. Xyler's info could be our ticket to figuring out who's got it in for us. We just need to follow the crumbs without getting blasted. Crumbs, Vex said, raising an eyebrow. More like breadcrumbs leading to a furnace. Optimism, Vex, try it, Thale shot back with a wry smile. We need to dig into these factions, see who had the most to gain from a human scapegoat. Easy, Rogan muttered, sarcasm dripping from his voice. We just infiltrate top-secret organizations with a bounty on our heads. What could possibly go wrong? Everything, Kira said, but there was a determined set to her jaw. But we're not dead yet. Thale nodded, feeling a spark of resolve. That's the spirit. We've survived worse. Barely, but still. As they plotted their next move in the safety of the cantina's shadows, one thing was clear. They were a long way from safe, and even further from clearing their names. But if they could peel back the layers of conspiracy and deceit, they might just have a chance to turn the tables. All right, Thale said, his voice steady despite the chaos swirling around them. Let's give these bastards a run for their money. His crew nodded, the tension tempered by a shared understanding. They were pirates, outlaws, and now, perhaps unlikely heroes in their own twisted tale, and the galaxy was about to find out just how tenacious they could be. The cantina hummed with the kind of energy you only find in places where hope came to die and take a long, slow, booze-soaked nap. The patrons were too busy losing their wages to notice the fugitives in their midst, the kind of anonymity Thale Harrow and his crew could appreciate. As he sipped on something that claimed to be alcohol but tasted more like industrial solvent, Thale laid out the plan. "Right," Thale said, leaning over the table. "We need to break into the Temple of Reclamation. It's got a high-security data archive. That's where we'll find the evidence to clear our names." Vex raised an eyebrow, his expression dripping with skepticism. "Break into a temple sounds like a death wish wrapped in a suicide note." "Temple, S.H. Memple," Thale shot back. "It's a building with files we need. Besides, I like a challenge." Kira, ever the optimist, chimed in. "If we pull this off, we'll be famous for something other than being the galaxy's favorite scapegoats. Or dead," Rogan grumbled. "But hey, at least we'll die famous, right?" "That's the spirit," Thale said dryly. "Look, the temple's the only place with the data cores we need. They're paranoid enough about security to keep hard copies. If we can get those, we can prove someone's setting humans up." Vex rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "And by someone, you mean aliens?" "Possibly," Thale replied. Xyler hinted at multiple factions. Could be aliens, corporations, or just the galaxy's worst fan club. All with a vested interest in blaming humans. "Great," Rogan muttered. "We're up against the universe's most competent scapegoaters." "So how do we get in?" Kira asked, eyes bright with a dangerous blend of hope and naivety. Thale grinned, pulling out a holomap. "We can't waltz in the front door, so we'll have to take the scenic route. There's a service tunnel leading under the temple. It's supposed to be for maintenance, but it'll work for us." Vex snorted. "And by work you mean we might not die horribly in a cramped tunnel." "Exactly," Thale said, folding the map. "We move tonight. Grab what gear you need. And if you see someone looking like they want to kill you, smile and wave." With a plan as solid as a sandcastle in a hurricane, they finished the last of their drinks and slipped out into Navurax's grim streets, each step echoing with the sound of impending doom. The Temple of Reclamation loomed like a giant middle finger to architectural beauty. It was as if someone had decided to build it based on a toddler's sketch while riding a roller coaster during an earthquake. The crew approached the service tunnel, its entrance hidden behind a stack of crates that had probably been abandoned around the same time the galaxy had abandoned common sense. "This is it," Thale said, crouching by the entrance. "Everyone ready?" "I was born ready," Vex replied, flashing a grin. Then promptly forgot how. Kira nodded, her enthusiasm undimmed by the situation. "Let's do this." Rogan rolled his eyes but checked his weapon. "I'd rather be anywhere else, but since we're all suicidal." "Sure." They squeezed into the tunnel, the air thick with the scent of mold and forgotten regrets. With each step, the narrow space closed in, promising a swift end if they slipped up. "You know," Vex said, his voice echoing off the walls, "we're basically a band of idiots wandering into a trap." "Wouldn't be the first time," Thale replied, pressing forward. "But if we pull this off, it might be the last." The tunnel finally opened up into the temple's underbelly, a confusing mess of pipes and machinery that hummed with an ominous energy. Thale led the way, navigating the labyrinthine passages with a confidence that bordered on reckless. "Over there," he whispered, pointing to a hatch marked with the universal symbol for keep out or die. "That's our way in," Rogan snorted. "Friendly place." "Only if you're not on their list," Thale said, prying the hatch open. "Which, lucky for us, we are." One by one, they slipped inside, entering the temple's lower levels. The corridors were silent, the air thick with the kind of foreboding that usually preceded a particularly nasty ambush. "We need to find the main data core," Thale said, glancing around. "It should be 2 levels up. Quietly now." "Quietly," Vex echoed, his voice a wry whisper, like a herd of space elephants. The ascent was nerve-wracking, every creak and groan of the ancient structure setting their nerves on edge. They reached the data core room, a sterile chamber lined with racks of servers and stacks of physical files. "Jackpot," Kira breathed, eyes wide. Let's grab what we need and get out, Thale said, plugging a device into the nearest terminal. Kira, see if you can find anything on aliens or conspiracy factions. As Kira rifled through the files, the others kept watch. The minutes dragged on, tension coiling like a spring. Got it, Kira said, holding up a file. Encrypted data points to alien tech and bioengineering. Perfect, Thale replied, grinning. Let's. A klaxon blared, slicing through the temple's silence like a death knell. Red lights flashed and the unmistakable sound of approaching guards echoed in the distance. Time to go, Rogan barked, already moving towards the exit. They bolted, the temple's corridors now a blur of motion and panic. As they raced through the twisting halls, the sound of pursuit grew louder, the guards not far behind. Split up, Thale shouted. Meet back at the rust bucket. He didn't wait for a response, diving down a side passage with Rogan hot on his heels. The temple's bowels twisted and turned, offering a maze of choices with no clear path to safety. Left, Thale yelled, skidding around a corner only to find himself face to face with a guard. Without hesitating, he lashed out, knocking the guard's weapon aside before delivering a swift kick that sent the guard sprawling. Nice, Rogan grunted, stepping over the unconscious body. Finesse. Desperation, Thale corrected, leading the way through a narrow passage. We're almost out. They burst into the open air, the city of Navurax sprawling before them. The cacophony of sirens and shouting guards faded as they ducked into the shadows, navigating the city's alleys with practiced ease. By some small miracle, the crew reunited at the rust bucket, breathless but alive. Kira clutched the files to her chest, her eyes shining with adrenaline-fueled triumph. We did it, she said, grinning from ear to ear. We actually did it. Vex leaned against the ship, letting out a long breath. And we didn't even get shot. Close enough, Rogan muttered, glancing around warily. Let's get the hell out of here before they change their minds. As the rust bucket roared to life and lifted off, Thale allowed himself a moment of relief. They had the information they needed, a thread they could follow to unravel the truth behind the plague and the conspiracy against humans. What's our next move? Kira asked, settling into her seat. We dig into these files, Thale said, staring out at the stars. Find out who's behind this, and then we make them regret ever hearing the name Thale Harrow, Vex finished, a wicked grin on his face. That's the plan, Thale replied, feeling a flicker of hope amidst the chaos. This isn't over, not by a long shot. The rust bucket sped through the void, leaving Navurax and its tangled web of betrayal behind. One thing was certain, the galaxy had underestimated this ragtag crew of outlaws, and they were about to find out just how big a mistake that was. The rust bucket limped through space, a wheezing, clanking testament to the adage that hope is for fools and gamblers. Inside, the crew tried to piece together their next move while desperately ignoring the looming specter of imminent failure. Rogan sat hunched over a console, tapping away with the enthusiasm of someone defusing a bomb with wet spaghetti. I've got good news and bad news, he declared without looking up. Vex, sprawled across a chair like a lazy cat on a sunlit windowsill, grinned. Is the good news that we're not dead yet? Yeah, but don't get too comfortable. The bad news is we're being tracked. Tracked? Kira's voice went up a notch, that dangerous blend of worry and hope mixing in her tone like oil and water. Tracked, Rogan affirmed, tapping one last key with the finality of a judge's gavel. And it's not by the local neighborhood watch. Thale, who had been staring out the viewport as if expecting the universe to suddenly offer up a solution on a silver platter, turned with a frown. What do you mean? Alien faction, Rogan said, his voice as dry as a desert at noon. I picked up a signature we saw back at Navurax. They're tailing us, probably looking to get their hands on those files we pinched. Fantastic, Thale muttered, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Just what we need, more unwanted guests. Kira bit her lip. Maybe they're just curious, Vex snorted. Yeah, curious like a cat with a laser pointer. They're probably thinking about the quickest way to fry us into oblivion. Or worse, Rogan added. They could capture us and make us watch their version of interpretive dance. The thought of it sent a shiver through the room. Even the universe's worst torturers wouldn't stoop that low. Or would they? With every passing moment, the rust bucket's sensors screamed out warnings as the alien ship crept closer, like a shadow you'd rather not notice until it's too late. Thale knew it was only a matter of time before they caught up. "All right," Thale said, trying to inject some semblance of authority into his voice. "We need to lose them. Any ideas?" "Sure," Vex said, shrugging. "We could turn off the engines and pretend we're space junk." Rogan looked up from his console, eyes narrow. "That's the stupidest idea I've ever heard." Vex flashed a smile. "Then I guess it's perfect for us." Kira's mind raced, her optimism struggling to find a foothold amidst the bleakness. "What about the asteroid belt near the Cascaran system? We could hide there." "Hide?" Rogan shook his head. "We're not exactly inconspicuous. The rust bucket isn't capable of subtlety." "Neither are you," Vex quipped, earning a glare from Rogan that could have seared paint from a wall. Thale raised a hand, cutting through the bickering. "Both of you knock it off. Kira might be onto something. We could use the belt to mask our signature, confuse their sensors. Or run into an asteroid and do their job for them," Rogan muttered, but he didn't argue further. With what could generously be called a plan in place, the crew set course for the asteroid belt. Tension coiled in the cockpit, the air thick with the kind of anticipatory dread that usually preceded a catastrophic failure. The rust bucket lurched into the belt, weaving through the chaotic mess of space rocks with all the grace of a drunkard on a tightrope. Vex's fingers danced over the controls as he steered, muttering curses and prayers in equal measure. As they delved deeper, the alien ship hovered at the edge of the belt, cautious but unwilling to lose its quarry. The crew watched with bated breath, hoping the universe might toss them a bone for once. "Hold it steady," Thale instructed, his eyes glued to the sensors. "We need to give them the slip." "I've got a better idea," Vex said, a wild grin spreading across his face. "How about we give them something else to think about?" Before anyone could ask what he meant, Vex slammed a button, deploying a barrage of scrap metal from the rust bucket's hidden compartments. The debris shot out like a shotgun blast, hurtling towards the alien ship in a deadly cloud. "What the hell?" Rogan yelped, gripping his console as if it might save him. "Improvised chaff," Vex explained, a gleam of mischief in his eyes. "Gives them something to worry about while we make our escape." Kira peered at the sensors, her voice tinged with a mix of relief and disbelief. "It's working. They're having trouble tracking us." "See," Vex said, leaning back with a satisfied smirk. "Not such a stupid idea after all." "Great," Rogan muttered. "We've gone from sitting ducks to slightly more animated ducks." With the alien ship temporarily confounded, the rust bucket slipped through the belt, emerging on the far side with a measure of unexpected success. Thale exhaled, the tension easing from his shoulders. "Nice work," he conceded, nodding to Vex. "But let's not make a habit of it." Vex chuckled. "Scared of a little excitement, Captain." "You call this excitement?" "I call it tempting fate," Thale replied, rubbing the back of his neck. "Now, let's put some distance between us and our pursuers before they recover." The rust bucket surged forward, engines straining as they fled the asteroid belt and the shadow of death that lurked behind. But even as they put light years between themselves and the alien faction, Thale knew their troubles were far from over. Hours later, with the immediate threat behind them, the crew gathered in the dimly lit common area, the atmosphere as heavy as a neutron star. "We can't keep running forever," Rogan said, breaking the silence. "We're just delaying the inevitable." Thale leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "What do you suggest?" "We can't fight them head-on." "Maybe we should," Rogan countered. "Take the fight to them like we did back there." Kira shook her head, her youthful enthusiasm tempered by the reality of their situation. "We need more than bravado. We need allies, someone who believes us." "Who?" Rogan demanded. "Last I checked, we're the galaxy's most wanted." "Not exactly the kind of people others line up to help." "Maybe someone with a grudge against the aliens," Kira suggested, her voice wavering slightly. "Or someone who hates humans slightly less," Vex added, earning a chuckle from Thale. The laughter was short-lived, however, as the weight of their predicament settled in again. Thale sighed, running a hand through his hair. We find someone willing to listen to us, someone with influence, but until then we keep our heads down. And if we can't, Rogan pressed. Thale met his gaze, determination mingling with exhaustion. Then we go down fighting, but not today. The conversation lulled, each member of the crew retreating into their thoughts. Thale felt the creeping tendrils of doubt, the whispers of failure that threatened to unravel their fragile unity. But he couldn't let that happen. Not yet. The rust bucket drifted through space, a lone speck against the vastness of the void. Days passed in a blur of worry and fruitless planning, the crew's mood growing as dark as the space around them. It was during one of these interminable stretches that the other shoe dropped, with all the subtlety of a meteor strike. "Incoming message," Vex announced, breaking the monotony of the cockpit with a voice that carried equal parts intrigue and concern. Thale leaned forward, frowning. "From who?" "Encrypted, but it's not one of yours," Vex replied, fingers dancing over the console. "Hold on, I'm decoding it." The crew gathered around, the message playing out across the holo screen in jagged, flickering text. "Surrender." The word hung in the air, a simple command that carried the weight of inevitability. "That's it?" Rogan asked incredulously. "Not even a please or a threat to go with it?" "Must be the aliens," Kira said, her voice a mix of fear and defiance. "Good guess," Vex agreed. "Looks like they're done playing games." Thale's mind raced, their options dwindling with every moment. Surrender wasn't an option, not when they had the information needed to clear their names. "So what now?" Vex asked, looking to Thale for direction. "We keep moving," Thale said, his voice firm. "We can't let them catch us, not until we've figured out our next step." "Which is?" Rogan prompted, frustration edging into his tone. "We find someone who can help us. There's a colony on the outskirts of the Phalian sector that might be willing to listen." "And if they don't?" Rogan pressed. "Then we keep looking," Thale replied, though he felt the weight of their predicament more keenly than ever. As the crew returned to their duties, Thale lingered in the cockpit, staring out at the stars. The universe was vast, indifferent, and filled with people who would happily see them dead. But somewhere out there, there had to be someone who could help. He just had to find them before it was too late. Thale Harrow sat slumped in the dark, the kind of dark that wasn't just absence of light but felt like it swallowed hope whole and belched despair. His hands were bound behind him, the metal chair under him a testament to the alien's commitment to discomfort. The room, if you could call it that, was more of a cage designed by someone who thought minimalism and torture were a perfect match. "Well, Thale," he muttered to himself, "you've really outdone yourself this time." The sound of his own voice was oddly comforting, even if he was just talking to keep the panic at bay. The alien captors hadn't said much, just the usual surrender nonsense. He figured their conversational skills were limited to monosyllables and threats, not exactly the chatty types, these aliens. No invitations to tea or series recommendations. Just a stark room and a guard who looked like it lost a bet. Meanwhile, back on the rust bucket, the crew was in a state of organized chaos, which was their usual setting. Vex was manning the console with a reckless abandon that suggested he'd either save them or explode spectacularly. No middle ground. "Right, so Thale's probably having a whale of a time wherever he's hauled off to," Vex noted dryly, trying to hack into the alien comms. "Probably sipping cocktails and discussing the finer points of existential dread with our hosts." Kira paced the room, bouncing ideas off the wall like a rubber ball in a confined space. "We need a plan," she said, not for the first time. "A plan," Rogan echoed, rubbing his temples. "How about we don't die? I've grown quite attached to my skin. It's the only one I've got." "Great plan," Vex chimed in. "Why didn't we think of that sooner? I'll just pop a don't die into the computer and it'll sort us right out." Kira stopped pacing, her mind racing faster than the rust bucket on a good day. "We need to use their arrogance against them. They're so sure they've got us on the ropes they've left a crack open." Rogan raised an eyebrow. And this crack is their ship's security. It's like they think no one would dare break in. But they're dealing with us and we don't dare so much as recklessly stumble into. Vex grinned, the kind of grin you'd expect from a predator who just saw dinner. Now you're talking my language. So what's the plan, boss? Kira outlined her idea with the precision of someone who'd been thinking 3 steps ahead since breakfast. They'd use the rust bucket to spoof a signal, making it seem like there was an emergency on the alien's ship. As the aliens scrambled to troubleshoot, the crew would slip in, grab Thale, and any evidence that might point to the real culprits of the plague. "You sure this'll work?" Rogan asked, skepticism in his voice. "Nope," Kira replied cheerfully. "But since when has that stopped us?" And so they set the plan in motion. The rust bucket, bless its rusty hull, responded with a series of groans and clanks that were about as reassuring as a toddler with a chainsaw. Still, it managed to hack into the alien systems, broadcasting a fabricated distress signal. "Let's see if they are as dumb as they look," Vex said, fingers dancing over the console. On the alien ship, chaos reigned as alarms blared. The aliens, apparently not the sharpest tools in the intergalactic shed, scrambled to address the emergency. This left just enough wiggle room for our intrepid crew. Vex, Rogan, and Kira suited up, looking every bit like a trio of space janitors sent to clean up a mess they had no business touching. They slipped into the alien ship through a maintenance hatch, the kind of oversight that spoke volumes about the aliens' confidence or lack of imagination. "Remember, we're looking for Thale and anything that smells like evidence," Kira whispered, leading the way. Vex snorted. "Evidence? I thought we were just here for the free snacks." They navigated through the corridors, the ship's interior as welcoming as a tax audit. It wasn't long before they stumbled upon the room where Thale was being held. Rogan, always the practical sort, took point. "All right, let's do this quick and quiet." Vex smirked. "I'm more of a quick and loud kind of guy, but I'll make an exception." Kira unlocked the door with a deftness that would make a locksmith weep with envy. Inside, Thale looked up, a mix of relief and resignation on his face. "Took you long enough," he said, struggling to his feet as they untied him. "I was beginning to think you traded me for a better captain." "Tempting," Rogan replied, handing Thale a makeshift weapon, a pipe that had seen better days. "But we figured you'd complain wherever you ended up." With Thale back in the fold, they turned their attention to the evidence. If the aliens were keeping anything that could clear their names, it would be in the data core room. "Time to find the smoking gun," Kira declared, leading them deeper into the ship. The data core room was a fortress of blinking lights and screens, a technological nightmare for anyone who wasn't Vex. He set to work, hacking into the systems with a gleeful abandon that suggested he was born for this. "Got it," Vex announced, pulling out a data chip that glowed ominously. "This little beauty has everything we need." "Great. Now let's get out of here before they realize their ship isn't actually on fire," Thale said, ushering them back the way they came. Their escape was a mad dash, the kind of frantic sprint that left no room for elegance. Alarms blared, the ship waking up to the intrusion like a cranky giant with a toothache. They burst through the maintenance hatch, scrambling back to the rust bucket. "Start her up," Thale barked, slamming the hatch shut behind them. The rust bucket roared to life, engines screaming in protest but complying nonetheless. They shot away from the alien ship, a ragged cheer echoing in the cockpit. "Can't believe that actually worked," Rogan said, breathless and incredulous. Vex shrugged, a smug grin plastered on his face. "Never doubt the power of stupid plans." As they put distance between themselves and the alien ship, Thale sank into his chair, the weight of their predicament feeling lighter if only for a moment. "Nice to have you back," Kira said, patting his shoulder. "Almost missed your grumpy face." "Glad to be back," Thale replied, the relief in his voice palpable. "But don't get used to this. We're still in deep." "Yeah, well," Vex said, kicking back and propping his feet on the console. "Deep's where we live." The rust bucket sailed through the stars, a battered but unbroken vessel with a crew that refused to go quietly. With the evidence in hand, the stage was set for the next act in their desperate bid for vindication. But for now, they had each other, a ship that sometimes worked when it wanted to, and a universe full of people who would sooner see them dead. It was enough. "Next stop," Thale announced, staring out into the vast expanse. "Finding someone who'll listen." "And if they don't?" Kira asked, an edge of defiance in her voice. "Then we make them," Thale replied, a grim determination hardening his features. "Because if there's one thing we're good at, it's surviving against the odds." The crew settled into a familiar rhythm, the comfort of shared gallows humor and camaraderie weaving through the tension. The universe might be indifferent, but here, on this piece of junk called the Rust Bucket, they were unstoppable. For now, that would have to be enough. The Rust Bucket limped through space, a testament to human ingenuity or perhaps sheer stubbornness. Thale Harrow, freshly rescued and still nursing bruises from the alien's idea of hospitality, leaned back in his chair. "All right, let's talk about the giant, alien-shaped elephant in the room. Who's pulling the strings on this plague nonsense?" Kira, never one to mince words, crossed her arms. "The real question is, why do you care? We've got our evidence, we could just run." "Run where?" Thale shot back. "Everywhere's the same story. Humans did it. 100,000 credits for a human, posters plastering every cantina wall. I'd like to order a drink without getting shot at, thanks." Vex, ever the optimist, chimed in from his console fortress. "Plus, there's the small detail of our ship falling apart." "I don't think she's got a long-distance sprint in her, right?" Rogan added, leaning against the bulkhead like it was the only thing holding him up. "We either clear our names or we end up as space dust, and I'm allergic to space dust." Thale rubbed his temples. "Fine. Let's take a look at what we got from the alien ship." Vex grinned, pulling up the data chip's contents onto the flickering holo screen. "It's like decrypting a love letter from the galaxy's most paranoid ex. Give me a sec." Kira peered over his shoulder. "No pressure, Vex, but if you screw this up, we're toast." Vex waved a hand dismissively. "Toast, schmost. I eat encryption for breakfast." The room filled with the soft hum of data processing, punctuated by Vex's muttering. Finally, he let out a triumphant laugh. "Bingo. Looks like our friends over there are part of something big. Real big, a coalition of alien factions." Thale leaned forward, interest piqued. "Coalition, like a book club but with genocide." "Exactly," Vex said. "They've been using humans as the scapegoat to keep attention off their own dirty laundry. This plague, total fabrication. Well, mostly. There's an actual virus, but their design. Just needed a fall guy." Rogan made a face. "Aliens playing politics. Who saw that coming?" Kira shook her head, lips pressing into a thin line. "So we're caught between alien factions and their intergalactic pissing contest." "Basically," Vex confirmed. "But here's the kicker. I've got names, locations, the whole shebang." Thale drummed his fingers against the armrest. "Then we need to make sure everyone else sees this too. Put it out there for the galaxy to chew on." "And how do you suggest we do that?" Kira asked. "Our last attempt at a broadcast ended with half the ship's systems fried." "Yeah, about that," Rogan interjected. "The Rust Bucket's holding together with hope and duct tape. One more stunt and she might just give up the ghost." Thale grinned. "We'll just have to be smarter about it then. We need to find someone who can get this information to the masses. Someone who doesn't hate humans," Kira added. "Or want to sell us for credits," Vex snorted. "That narrows it down." "There's one place," Thale said, remembering a place he'd avoided like the plague, pun unintended until now. "Navurax, the city that's a hive of scum and villainy." Rogan groaned. "Navurax. I thought we agreed never to go back there, ever." "Desperate times," Thale replied. "And it's the last place they'd expect us to go willingly." Kira shrugged. "It's not like we have good options, just more interesting bad ones." Vex spun his chair around, looking like a cat that's just been told it's getting a new scratching post. "Navurax it is then. Let's see if we can't pull off the impossible one more time." As the Rust Bucket veered toward Navurax, Kira briefed the crew on their intel. "So, this alliance, they're more disorganized than a toddler's playroom. If we can expose them, they'll turn on each other faster than an angry hive of bees." "Bees," Rogan asked, arching an eyebrow. Earth reference, Kira said with a wave of her hand. Point is, we have a shot. And what a shot, Vex quipped. 1 in a million. Those are our favorite odds, Thale said with a crooked smile. As they approached Navurax, the city loomed like a tangled mess of metal and lights, a sprawling testament to chaos theory and urban planning. The rust bucket slipped into a docking bay with a groan that sounded suspiciously like a death rattle. The crew disembarked, entering the city with the kind of confidence that only came from a history of bad decisions paying off. Navurax was everything they remembered, a place where the air smelled perpetually of burnt circuitry and desperation. Kira led the way through the winding streets, her eyes on the prize. We need to find a contact who can broadcast this information. Someone with reach. Problem is, everyone here is either trying to screw you or sell you something, Thale said, glancing around at the eclectic mix of species and stalls. So, just like home, Rogan replied dryly. They made their way to the cantina, a place so dingy it made the rust bucket look like a 5-star hotel. Inside, the patrons were a mix of shady and shadier, exactly the kind of place where deals were made over a drink that could probably double as paint thinner. Vex leaned against the bar, catching the eye of a grizzled bartender who looked like he hadn't slept in a decade. We're looking for someone who can help with a little outreach. Know anyone? The bartender snorted, wiping a glass with a rag that might once have been white. Depends, you got credits. Kira, ever the negotiator, slid a small stack of credits across the bar. This enough for an introduction. The bartender pocketed the credits with a nod. Might be. See that booth in the corner, talk to Xyler Vex. He's the kind of guy who knows things. Xyler Vex, Thale muttered, exchanging a glance with Vex. Any relation? Vex shrugged, nonchalant. Common name like Smith. They approached the booth where Xyler Vex sat nursing a drink that bubbled disconcertingly. He looked up, his face a picture of practiced indifference. What brings you misfits to my corner of the universe? Thale took a seat, gesturing for the others to join him. We need to reach the galaxy with some information that's worth its weight in credits. Think you can help? Xyler leaned back, considering. Depends on the information and the credits. Kira slid the data chip across the table. This should cover it. Xyler picked up the chip, turning it over in his hands. Interesting. I'm guessing this has something to do with the angry aliens looking for human scapegoats. Got it in one, Vex said. Xyler chuckled, a low, knowing sound. I might know a few channels that can make this go viral, but what's in it for me? Your name in the history books, Rogan suggested, entirely deadpan. Thale leaned in, dropping his voice. Look, there's more than credits at stake here. You help us, you get to be the guy who toppled a conspiracy. Plus, we'll owe you a favor, and we're very resourceful. Xyler considered this, eyes glinting with a mixture of interest and self-preservation. All right, you've got yourself a deal, but if this blows up in my face, I'm taking you all down with me. Fair enough, Thale said, extending a hand. Let's make some history. As they left the cantina, the weight of their task settled over them. They were close, so tantalizingly close to turning the tide. Rogan exhaled, glancing skyward. Think anyone will believe us? They better, Thale replied, or we're in for one hell of a fight. But that's a problem for tomorrow. For now, Vex said, cracking his knuckles, let's see how fast we can make this go viral. Back on the rust bucket, they prepared for the inevitable fallout. Thale watched the stars, feeling a strange mix of hope and dread. They were about to yank the rug out from under the galaxy's feet. Here we go, Kira said, activating the transmission. The galaxy awaited, unsuspecting, complacent, and about to be blindsided in the most spectacular way possible. With any luck, it would be enough to tip the scales. Because if there was one thing Harrow's crew excelled at, it was pulling off the impossible. The rust bucket drifted through space, its hull groaning like an old man's knees on a rainy day. Inside, the crew was gathered around the holo screen, watching the galaxy's reaction to their little information bomb. As the data spread faster than a rumor in a small town, the galaxy was experiencing a collective awakening, and not the pleasant kind. More like the kind where you're suddenly aware you've been sleepwalking naked through a crowded mall. Didn't think it'd actually work, Rogan said, arms crossed, leaning against the bulkhead, his go-to pose for every major revelation or minor inconvenience. Guess we really are living in the end times. "O ye of little faith," Vex replied, flashing a grin that could power a small solar farm. "I told you it'd catch fire. Viral, they call it." Just like that other thing we're being blamed for. Thale Harrow, captain of this ragtag crew and the only one brave enough to call this ship home, watched the screen with a mix of satisfaction and disbelief. It's not every day you get to see a galaxy hit the brakes on a witch hunt. Kira, ever the pragmatist, shook her head. Don't start popping the champagne just yet. They might stop blaming us, but that doesn't mean they'll start liking us. Likes are overrated, Thale said, rubbing a bruise that was fading like yesterday's bad decisions. What matters is we're not getting shot at for sport anymore. Speak for yourself, Rogan chimed in. Some of us enjoy the thrill of near-death experiences. Your therapist must love you, Kira replied, her sarcasm sharp enough to cut through the ship's recycled air. Rogan shrugged. Don't have one. Talking to you guys is therapy enough. The holo screen flashed with a news update, the headlines telling tales of fractured alliances and intergalactic finger-pointing. The coalition of alien factions, exposed for their role in the plague's fabrication, was crumbling faster than a stale cookie at the bottom of a gravity well. Look at him go, Vex said, eyes wide with amusement. Like a bunch of kids caught with their hands in the cookie jar, more like a bunch of politicians caught with their pants down, Thale corrected. And about as dignified, Kira leaned forward, eyes narrowing as she read through the scrolling text. Seems like they're too busy fighting amongst themselves to worry about us. For now, anyway. That's the thing with politics, Rogan added. You don't have to outrun the lion, just the other gazelle. Speaking of running, Thale said, turning his focus back to the crew, we should probably think about our next move. We can't stay on the rust bucket forever, why not? Vex asked, feigning innocence. I'm emotionally attached, because I'm pretty sure this ship is held together by spit and prayers, Thale replied, and my faith's running on empty. Besides, Kira interjected, we're heroes now. We can't live in a floating scrap heap. Yeah, heroes, Rogan said, his voice dripping with irony. The galaxy's saviors. Sure, that's us. Hey, don't sell yourself short, Vex said, clapping Rogan on the back. You're the most heroic pessimist I know. As the crew bantered, the rust bucket's sensors beeped, signaling an incoming message. Thale raised an eyebrow, curiosity piqued. Now what? Kira tapped a few controls, bringing up the message on the holo screen. It was an official communiqué from the Galactic Council, a group known for their ability to make bureaucracy seem as exciting as watching paint dry. Ah, the Galactic Council, Rogan groaned. The universe's answer to a bad day at the DMV. Thale squinted at the message, which was filled with the kind of formal language that made you want to start drinking early. They're thanking us for our service, he said, disbelief coloring his voice. Vex snorted. Yeah, right. I'm sure they're just itching to give us medals and a parade, more like itching to cover their own asses, Kira muttered. But hey, if they're offering medals, I'm not saying no. The message continued, outlining the Council's plans to restore humanity's reputation and offering the crew an official pardon. An olive branch extended with all the grace of a politician kissing babies during election season. Pardon? Rogan said, eyes widening. Does that mean we can finally go into a cantina without getting our heads blown off? Seems that way, Thale said, nodding slowly. I'm not sure how to feel about that. Don't worry, Vex said with a grin, I'm sure you'll find something else to screw up. Thale chuckled, shaking his head. Sounds about right. But for now, let's enjoy the moment. Enjoying things, Rogan mused. Not sure I remember how to do that. Start with a drink, Kira suggested. Preferably one that doesn't come with a side of potential assassination. As the crew absorbed the gravity of their newfound freedom, the rust bucket continued its slow orbit, a relic of their past adventures and misadventures. It was a ship that had seen better days, but it had carried them through space and chaos. Speaking of enjoying things, Vex said, snapping his fingers as if he just remembered the secret to life, how about a little celebration? Thale echoed, a skeptical eyebrow rising. What did you have in mind? Nothing too crazy, Vex replied, winking. Just a little toast to remind us that we're still alive. Kira laughed, the sound genuine and rare. I could toast to that. Rogan, never one to miss an opportunity for a drink, nodded. Count me in. But if we're toasting, let's make it a good one, of course, Vex said, producing a bottle from one of the ship's many nooks. Stole this from a Centauri trader. Said it's strong enough to fuel a small shuttle, Centauri. Thale asked, eyeing the bottle with a mix of interest and caution. Last time I drank their stuff, I woke up 3 days later with no memory and a tattoo of a llama, Kira smirked. Better than a llama waking up with a tattoo of you, true, Thale admitted, cracking the bottle open. All right, let's do this. Vex poured the amber liquid into mismatched mugs, the beverage releasing a scent that was both enticing and vaguely alarming. The crew raised their mugs, eyes meeting in a moment of camaraderie that transcended their usual sarcasm and snark. To us, Thale said, his voice uncharacteristically sincere. To surviving the impossible and living to tell the tale, to not getting shot, Rogan added, ever the practical one. To making history, Kira said, raising her mug with a flourish. To the rust bucket, Vex concluded, and to whatever comes next. They clinked their mugs, the sound echoing through the ship like a celebration of everything they'd been through. The laughter, the danger, the moments of sheer stupidity that somehow always worked out in their favor. The drink burned like liquid fire on the way down, but it was a good burn, a reminder that they were alive and kicking in a galaxy that had tried its best to grind them down. After a few more rounds, the rust bucket felt less like a death trap and more like a home, albeit a home with questionable structural integrity. The crew lounged in the common area, their conversation meandering through the past and future with the ease of old friends who'd seen too much and lived to laugh about it. So what's next? Vex asked, eyes twinkling with the possibilities. Retirement. Rogan suggested, deadpan, maybe take up knitting. Kira snorted. You. Knitting. You can barely tie your own boots, true, Rogan conceded. But think about it. We could start a new trend, space pirates turned knitters. Could catch on. Thale shook his head, a smile tugging at his lips. I was thinking something a little more adventurous. Maybe find a new ship, something that doesn't threaten to kill us every 5 minutes. Adventurous. Vex echoed, eyebrows rising. And here I thought we'd done enough of that to last a lifetime. Adventure's not about what you've done, Thale replied, his tone thoughtful. It's about what you haven't done yet. Kira nodded, her gaze distant as if already plotting their next escapade. So, where to? Captain Thale considered the question, the weight of their journey settling comfortably on his shoulders. Anywhere that doesn't have our faces on a wanted poster. That narrows it down, Rogan said, his sarcasm softened by the warmth of camaraderie. Not as much as you'd think, Thale replied, setting down his mug. We've got a whole galaxy out there, and for once it doesn't hate us. Vex raised his hands, the universal gesture of someone about to say something profound, or profoundly stupid. Then let's make some new stories. To new stories, Kira agreed, the fire in her eyes mirrored by the others. As the rust bucket sailed on, a testament to resilience and reckless optimism, the crew settled into a comfortable silence, each lost in thoughts of what lay ahead. They were heroes now, at least according to some, but more importantly, they were survivors, bonded by shared struggles and victories. New stories, Thale murmured, glancing out at the star-streaked void. New horizons, and as they gazed into the galaxy, the unknown stretching out before them like an open book, they knew that whatever came next, they'd face it together, snark, sarcasm, and all.